All right, I think we're ready to go here, just a couple minutes early, as we usually try to do on our live stream. And just making sure my phone's off. And it's another Ask Me Anything live stream here at We the Governed. And I know as people are just jumping on the feed here, just a quick reminder to people that when you're going to be sending a comment to me, whether you can see the comment section on the left or down below, depending on what type of computer or whether you're doing this on your phone, just try to use the @WeTheGovern if you have a question that you're going to ask. Sometimes, especially towards the end of the live stream, there's just a lot of commentary back and forth usually. So it makes it just a little bit easier for me to actually pick out your question in the comments as they're coming down. I do generally try to answer the questions in the order that they're sent to me, but eventually there's so many that sometimes I'm trying to just pick out the ones I can see are actually questions and not back and forth commentary. And it's fine if there's back and forth commentary, it's just a little bit harder for me to actually spot it. So one of the things I usually try to do in the beginning of every one of these live streams is just to give you an idea of some of the places that I'll be speaking at. If I saw you yesterday in Kitsap County over there at the Silverdale Women's Republican Club meeting, it was good to see you. There were a lot of people there. That was a good presentation yesterday around noonish. And if I saw you Saturday over in Ellensburg, I was speaking at the Lincoln Day dinner over there and was the impromptu auctioneer as well. So that was kind of fun. A lot of good people, a lot of old friends that I saw out there, people I've known for a long time. I thought Randy Cruz did a good job in her presentation there. That was just fun to be out there again in Ellensburg. And also, if you've been to any of these recent Doge training classes, hopefully you're starting to pick out your targets locally and places that you want to go and pay attention to, and practicing your first public records request, and perhaps putting your team together on how you're going to be paying attention to local government. Speaking of Doge, I do have 6 classes coming up. Just a real quick recap for those of you, if you want to know more, go to the We the Govern website. I should have it linked to down below in the video description area, but you can also just go to wethegovern.com and click on the Doge training class article, and you'll see I'm trying to keep that updated. The one thing I did notice, I might have to make a quick change on the order in which it shows some of those classes coming up. But the next one's going to be next Monday, Snohomish County. This is the second one I've done in Marysville because a lot of people weren't able to make the first one. This is going to be scheduled June 16th. That's a Monday. San Juan County, June 19th. So first time I put a class on out there like this for Doge training. Enumclaw, finally, we got that one set up on the 23rd. And then Kitsap County on the 26th, because I believe that's a Thursday, Monday and a Thursday there. Lewis County, close to home for me, we'll be doing that one on July 14th. And Clown County on July 17th. Now, those are the only ones that I've officially scheduled coming up the next month and a half or so. So if one of those classes is close to you, make sure you come prepared, first come, first serve. You can't get reservations ahead of time, but just make sure you're there and do show up early. It just makes it a little bit easier to, we do start right on time at 6 on all of these training classes. So you do want to be there early, just kind of get signed in and get set up. But there will be more. I'm in discussions with another 7 or 8 locations around the state, and that's just a matter of trying to set up the actual schedules or locations. If you're with a group of people and you want to find a time to do one in your community, really just have to find a location. It's best if they can handle at least 65 people or more. It really is better if it can handle about 100 people, at least based on the experience that I've had with doing a number of these classes so far. It needs some kind of a sound system so that I can communicate to everybody, and it's nice if it has the ability to do a projection screen with an HDMI output of some kind, and then it's just a matter of setting the date up. Most churches do have a space that would basically fit that criteria. If you have a pastor that's willing to be somewhat involved in helping hold government accountable locally, or at least letting us come in and doing a presentation there, I find that those work pretty well. But we've been at breweries, and we've actually been on a college up in Tacoma once. Don't know if I can do that again the second time, but we've been around doing these a few times, and there's a lot of opportunities, I think, to do a lot more moving forward. So with that, I just wanted to let you know that that's where I'll be, and hopefully you'll be there too. So there's a lot of opportunities to get going, and of course, as I kind of teased in the video description recently, we do seem to be entering that phase of the riot season around the country. The excuse used for the riots really doesn't matter because there will always be an excuse every summer, and college is out, and people, this is their opportunity. Apparently, to the left likes to fund a lot of these riots, and they're apparently, it looks like, based on some of the stories that have come out, several of the groups down in LA that are heavily involved in the riots around the ICE detention centers or the efforts to try to round up illegal alien criminals, that many of them are actually government-funded grant grifting operations that, of course, are recycling our tax dollars into making sure that they train people to be violent, basically threatening activists out there, throwing rocks, arsonists, looting stores, destroying cars, and setting cars on fire and attacking people. And that seems to be smashing concrete bollards so they can use the concrete to throw at people. Just really classic, good citizenship kind of activities. As we've seen before, the media's gone full hog into pretending that this is a peaceful riot and peaceful arson and peaceful violence and inevitably peaceful murder, just like they claimed that it was a summer of love in Seattle when Chaz Chop was created up there in Seattle. So we're seeing the same kind of demeanor going on right now. And the most significant thing, and when I'm doing these Doge training classes, it's all about following the money. And what you do see here is that I don't think we would have anything like the organizational attacks that we're seeing all over the country that are structured and put together like this. You wouldn't see them operating this way if it wasn't for our tax dollars being filtered into these operations. So when it comes to some of the Doge activities, Doge Washington or Doge DC, cutting off that grant money to violent organizations that filter their cash over to help facilitate these types of activities is probably a pretty effective tool to cut that money off. God knows we're wasting enough as it is, and we don't need to waste it there, and we don't need to hurt ourselves any more than we already are with the programs that we see going on. So let's just jump right into this, and let's see where we are at with some of these questions. Sorry, I was grabbing the wrong mouse there. Let's see. First question here. At least is the first question that I see. Let me make sure to scroll back up here. There was somebody here who mentioned this. MJ, I heard one of Walmart's CEOs is involved in funding. I think that's a response to the title that I had in the live stream here. And I've heard that too, but I don't know that that's a factual statement yet. So we'll have to see how it is. Somebody, Grin Toof, he says, you're at work, but I'm really grateful. Thanks for appreciating the video work here. Sick and tired of Bolshevik behavior. Get it out. Well, I'm going to tell you, Bolshevik behavior dominates most of the college campuses, pretty much most of the bureaucracy, most of the grant grifting operations that you see out there, and a lot of the other activity that's going on. So it's going to take a little bit of work to get those things changed. Let's see. We the people, of course, this is HawkFan for Life 88. We the people, of course, will and are paying for any and all damages. That is true. I'll never understand ruining your own city. Well, then you don't think like a leftist, because destroying the cities and their communities and their country and their nation is a big part of being a leftist. And that's just exactly what you have to do, because after all, tearing down the system, especially if there's anything good with it, it all goes hand in hand with anybody who has a Bolshevik leftist sort of perspective. Anybody that comes out of Evergreen State College, probably Western, or most of the other colleges, unfortunately, around there, that tends to be their attitude. And they oftentimes don't have any consequences for doing it. So those are the issues that we're having to deal with. Jason Fisher had a question here. Afternoon, Glenn. Let's say the courts get back control of the National Guard to the governor. Will he remove them and send them back to headquarters and leave the feds holding the bag? I think the question you're referring to there specifically is having to do with Governor Newsom down in California. And that is an interesting question. I don't think the courts There's a number of different cases. There's probably a number of articles that have already been written out there about it, and I'm sure there's a number of other people that have done some YouTube videos on this. But there's actually a fairly strongly established history of utilization of the National Guard and overriding by the feds, overriding the governor. And one of the things that you'll see, these were cases that came out of mostly the 60s, but there were several different activities that occurred back then that essentially demonstrated that the National Guard is essentially an extension, when necessary, of the federal government's military options, especially during disaster recovery, riot control, which has been used many times in the past. And even, I think the big Supreme Court case I thought it came out of Michigan, if I remember right. I'm fuzzy on the case now, and I just right off the top of my head, but it had to do with during the Vietnam War, deploying the reserves. I thought it was National Guard reserves that they deployed out of that state, and the governor was trying to stop them from doing it. And the Supreme Court ultimately said that they were going to do it anyway. So my guess is that that's going to be a difficult thing for Governor Newsom to prevail in, even with the delusional judges that exist out there today. But, remember during the first Trump administration, there were a lot of riots like this in the Summer of Love and violence and mostly peaceful destruction of cities around America and the mostly peaceful murder of many dozens of people back then in 2020. And oftentimes I think it was pretty rare generally that any of the governors did call out the National Guard, and they usually waited until after a lot of destruction had been waged. I do remember when the National Guard was called out in LA in 1992, but you had a different governor back then, and people mostly then, you didn't have the Democrat Party desiring to destroy the cities the way that they seem to be motivated to destroy them today. So this very odd direction, historically, that wasn't really a partisan thing. Usually politicians, regardless of whatever political stripe they may be, red or blue or whatever affiliation they might have had, they usually didn't want to destroy their cities. But now, of course, the left does seem to desire destroying the cities as quickly as they can. So, or provided that Trump's in the White House or Republicans in the White House, presumably they'll do it regardless of which Republicans in the White House from now on. So we'll just have to see how that goes. Let's see. Many United or Independent Many United. Are you all aware of the No Kings gatherings? Well, I'm aware of them, and that's just another leftist group. Remember, these guys change their names all the time. It just reminds you back in my days when I was a conservative activist at Columbia University, so I was in college, and they would have like 45 organizations endorsing and supporting and sponsoring a protest, and there'd be like 17 people that would show up. So somehow there were 45 different organizations, but only 17 people to represent all 45 of them there. That's what the left does. They just create, dozens and dozens of these groups. They apply for grants. Our government gives them money. They use that money to go out and riot in the street, apparently. And then, fortunately for us, probably a lot of that money gets stolen. And so the corruption internally probably reduces the amount of riots you have because some people are taking the money and running. But a decent number of them are actually taking the money and going out and, buying riot face masks and whatever we've been seeing on the video. It's shocking and interesting, actually, with the way social media's been lately, where you can see a politician get up and lie or the media get up and lie, live stream almost simultaneous, people on the ground documenting the violence that the talking head at the media or the politician is saying isn't going on, and yet you can see video of it going on at the same time. That's beautiful, actually, and that's stuff that's hard for people to unsee. And so I'm sure there's still people that believe what they're seeing parroted to them by the media or by some of these silly politicians. But the modern ability of citizen journalists to go out and actually document what's truly happening is really, I think, making a difference, and it's making a pretty big impact. Hawk Fan for Life 88. I'm hopeful that we're not having lagging issues. So if anybody else is having those, please let me know. But I'm hopeful that that's not going on right now. Okay, there's a lot of comments here, so let me just keep going down through here. Alpha Charlie Tango, riots are not protests. No, they aren't. And this is one of those things, having been involved in organizing quite a few protests myself over the years, especially during the lockdown, Inslee's lockdown world, when I was involved actively in planning events and activities, especially at the state capitol. there was I don't remember ever organizing a riot. I remember the lefties and the Antifa guys trying to start riots. I remember them trying to find ways of attacking people, but I don't remember any of the groups I was working with ever trying to riot or even having a riot happen when I was there. And some of these were large. You can 5,000, 6,000 people in some of these anti-lockdown protests that we had back then. And nobody ever went out and rioted. They cleaned up after themselves. They didn't leave garbage everywhere. We weren't taking hammers to the bollards so we could get concrete pieces to throw at the police. Nothing like that was going on. Even when Inslee called out the National Guard to basically prevent us from getting on the campus, because after all, when he found out he could just do that for no reason, even then there was no violence, there was no rioting, and none. It was just simply a kabuki theater for him to pretend like he was doing something as governor, and it was even nicer because he could keep all those riffraff like us protesters away from the state capitol. So anyway, we'll see what's happening. Berserkshire, rumor has it there's supposed to be some type of countrywide protests on June 14th. Have you heard anything about that? And the answer is yes, I have. That's actually the No Kings thing. That's really just an Antifa retread, and which is just MoveOn.org retread, which is just One America retread, which is just fill in the blank with whatever lefty group that you've seen out there doing something. It's mostly the same people. They might be wearing different hats. They might be getting cash from different sources. Unfortunately, a disturbing amount. It's probably started out as taxpayer cash, and now it's funneled in, and they're just organizing these groups. It'll be June 14th, and they'll do another one the following Saturday, and they'll just keep doing this wherever they think they can get away with it. It is a little interesting to me that they haven't been able to generate the same level of hype or violence in Seattle or Portland yet that I've seen compared to LA. LA seems to be the big one, but I'm sure that we got enough crazies up here that they'll be able to find enough people that they can do that, and they're getting paid enough that they can probably organize that pretty quickly if they want to. Let's see. The one thing I'm going to say about this, by the way, too, is that on the 14th, I know I have a graduation party that I'm hosting for a couple of my kids that just graduated, so and nephew and all that. So that's my focus that day. I'm not going out to any of the protests or the riots, the planned riots that they might have in Seattle or Portland. But for those of you who do, just stay safe out there. Video everything you can, document it as best you can, and that makes good video later on for us to show the mostly peaceful arson, assault, violence, and looting that inevitably goes hand in hand with almost everything the left does. Hawk fan for life, 88, independent Many United. I saw that on Scoot's channel today. It looks very well funded. Good day to stay home. I would say staying home when they have these protests is generally a good idea unless you're going to go out there and document it. And if you're going to do that, make sure that you go out there with some level of protection with you, and having a couple people to watch your back when you're filming. It's one of the hard things, having been around with a lot of people that have tried to document these things before. The left is all about violence and intimidation, always have been, and they're just more open about it now. So documenting that is a good thing, but just remember that you usually need some level of security around you. You can't watch your back all the time, and I wouldn't ever go there totally alone. There was an update. I think Dane Kirkendall was updating somebody else who had another question earlier here about the court denying California's request for an emergency injunction. That probably happened. I didn't see that, and that's just because I've been doing some video prep today and probably just didn't catch it. Another hearing's apparently scheduled for Thursday. They're probably filing a number of these cases. Remember, this is mostly just the Gavin Newsom knows he doesn't really have a leg to stand on this issue. But I guess they've decided that this is how they win the left. So let's go down and look at a couple more issues here. Sorry, it's not good live stream video when I'm coughing. Sorry about that. Jason Fisher, here's a question. The homeless population from Vancouver starting to spread into Home Depot in Clark County. Is this unique, and does Clark County have a camping ordinance? That's a good question. I don't know if Clark County has a camping ordinance. If they don't have one, they should try to pass one. It's a good idea. One of the challenges with the border of Vancouver, the city of Vancouver, is that it's very, if you ever look at the actual city boundaries, it's very jagged and kind of encompasses a lot. There's a lot of people live in the city of Vancouver, but the greater Vancouver area, which includes a lot of places that have a Vancouver address, but they're actually Clark County, and that's what you're really referring to there. It's the jurisdictional boundaries make a difference when it comes to law enforcement and ordinances, of course. So it is worth checking that out. And again, a lot of these are just imported drug addicts out of Portland or California and someplace, sometimes Seattle. If you're giving away free stuff or more free stuff and it seems cooler and better than some other city, they'll usually move around city to city. And if you don't believe me, just ask them. Most of the time, the ones that aren't passed out on the street on a fentanyl high or aren't just completely screaming and yelling at nobody on the sidewalk, but the people you can actually talk to occasionally, they'll tell you usually they're pretty open about it. They just travel around and go to the places that give them the best stuff, better food, more better drugs, whatever it is that they're trying to look for. And so they're moving around. And so if you watch more of them moving into your area, it's probably because there's a new grifting operation, homeless grifting operation. Maybe your jurisdiction just kicked out some more cash to one of these grifting operations that are pretending to help the homeless, but they're actually encouraging drug addiction and encouraging them to flood the zone in your community. And I would go back and see if you could stop the bleeding and stop that money going out to those groups, because unfortunately they're just terrible. Let's see. Alan Mongrel Van Cleve. Glenn, this MO goes back to the early beginnings of our country and is documented in the book that I sent you. Okay, thank you so much. Remind me of which book that is. I do get a lot of books sent to me. If you tell me which book it is, I will remember which one it is. So make sure you tell me which book that you sent me, and that'll be a good thing for me to go back and look at. I'm going to, just a little historical thing. Obviously, if you go back and you look about 120 years ago, 125 years ago plus, when anarchists were the equivalent of the Antifa of the day, and they were throwing bombs around the country and assassinating politicians all over America, it was actually not an uncommon thing back then. In fact, that was the time I believe that we had the highest level of political assassinations in our nation's history, including a president and including a lot of lower-level politicians around the state. I believe that my great-great-grandma in Seattle was actually an anarchist at the time. My grandfather told me that she probably was, and so she might have been involved. I know she was definitely involved in the more socialist side of the political fighting problems in Seattle, but also it was a different world and different era, and it meant different things back then. But so it is true that there is a long history of violence that has particularly after the Civil War, but even before. I mean, if you look at the battles in Kansas between the abolitionists and the anti-abolitionists and the pro-slave people and some of the fighting that occurred back then, this has happened in America before. But we will just have to see. Here's a question from Dane Kirkendall. I'm retiring from the Air Force in a few weeks and moving back to Thurston County, where I grew up. What can I do to help restore some sanity to this area? Well, I'm looking forward to having you move back into the community. It'd be fun to meet with you. My oldest daughter's actually in her first year at the Air Force Academy, so I'm just kind of curious and interested in that. The Air Force in our family means a little bit more now that we have a daughter at the academy and a son to also attend there pretty soon. So the first thing I would probably do is you can meet up with the Thurston County Republicans in the area, and I am a PCO. I don't go to their meetings consistently, as anybody who attends knows, but I do think that's probably not a bad place to start out getting involved and just finding out who's who. There are some specific races, City of Lacey, some of these other city council races and school board races this cycle that do matter. If you're coming in after that election cycle, then I'd be looking at some of the races in 2026, and there are a number of races that kind of border around Thurston County. If you do move back and you haven't been here before, I always think living a little bit more rural is a bonus for a family and for retirement. I do live rural myself, and I think that works no matter which state or which community you live in. If you have that option and you're comfortable with doing that, I think that's always a little bit better. But that's just my opinion. I got a question here from Michael Case. After seeing that some issues are beginning to pump up in Seattle, any ideas how Ferguson will deal with a second Chop Chaz if it goes that way? That's a good question, because Ferguson was cowardly and vanished without a trace during the first Chaz Chop event, and he does seem to believe that his political future is tied in with the hard left. And so he wants to make sure he does nothing to demonstrate anything about restoring public safety. Now, he wants to claim that he cares about public safety, but he's never exhibited anything that's demonstrated that in the past. So he's probably the most hostile to public safety of any governor that we've had for a long time. And so we'd have to see what actually happens. I am not confident that the left would go down a Chaz Chop route exactly right now. That was probably a lot of resources were expended by them, and energy was spent by them for pretty low value, and it drove a wedge even in on their own side. So my guess is they'll just have mostly peaceful violence and assaults and arson and looting in targeted areas of the community. They do seem to be picking on the Asian businesses quite a bit. So I would be pretty careful if you have a business in the International District. They might decide that destroying the UW campus a little bit more, since they've got a history of doing that recently. Maybe that's what they want to do. So I'd just be watching for that. My guess is that Ferguson probably would call out the National Guard if the left decide to burn down the UW. So if they decide that that's what they're going to do, is destroy the University of Washington, maybe Ferguson would get motivated after the first couple buildings burned down in a mostly peaceful arson effort, and maybe he'd decide that that's probably a good plan. But we'll have to see. Ferguson is wiser than Newsom in a way, because he's probably going to sit back and let Newsom take point, and the governor of New York and a couple of these other governors that are from bigger states, he lets them take point. He pretends like he cares, but he's sitting back politically and just letting them take the initial impact, and then he's going to adjust whatever tactics that he's going to allow the left to have in our state based on what he sees happen in these other places. So we'll have to see. And the answer is Jason Lee Eversole. Is it going to be peaceful or like California? Well, remember, California is, by Democrat Party's definition, peaceful. Just because they assault people, burn cars, shut down the city, loot the place, and destroy public property all over the place, that's what the Democrats call peaceful today. And if they start killing people, they'll call that peaceful murder, and just another day of protesting. My guess is that the Antifa guys up in Seattle would certainly be willing to commit the same level of violence, peaceful violence, of course, that you see down in California. It's just a question of whether they can get as many people organized and how much they're paying. There's usually they have to have a pretty big budget to run a reasonably peacefully violent organized arson effort, and I'm not sure how much money they're throwing into that right now. So we'll have to see. But I imagine that there is a tremendous opportunity for Trump, who seems to actually be willing to step in with the National Guard, to deploy it here too. And it'd be fascinating to see how Ferguson would probably overreact to that. So we'll just have to see what happens. Jason Fisher, question: Clark County is majority Democrat. It used to be a Republican majority. How and when did it flip, and can we flip it back Republican? Has Vancouver taken Clark County politics? Actually, I'm not sure that Clark County is truly a Democrat majority right now. It's really on the bubble. And it's flipped back and forth between Democrat and Republican for the last 20 years. So if you go back and look, it's moved back and forth. The more northern and rural areas of Clark County have been definitely Republican. One of the challenges that Clark County's had is that people escaping from California and from Portland have moved across the river, of course, and ended up in the Vancouver, Clark County area because it's beautiful. And so some of them, convincing them that maybe they don't want to destroy the community and have it be just like the place they fled from recently, that may take some outreach and I think some work, but we'll have to see how it goes. To the victor goes the myths and the monuments. That's true. And then they tear down those monuments in the future. What do you know about the creation of the United States Corporation in 1871 and how it changed government and constitution? And this has been a long debated issue that I hear repeatedly by people who seem to be focused on achieving nothing and arguing about something that's a little esoteric back in the day that probably makes almost no impact on anything that we're trying to get done today. It is one of those issues that comes up. There was some historic what was it? There was a historic thing when I was at the Freedom Foundation. This came up, I remember, about the Washington State Constitution not being valid in 1889. And that is a false rumor based on shockingly ignorant historical statements made by people who clearly didn't bother to go back and read the historical record. And I remember Trent England put together a very thorough analysis of it at the time. I should go back and pull that up because it actually is based on real documents and not imaginary fiction, which seems to be people's obsession of trying to go back and find something that somehow gives them, I don't know what, moral superiority or something that is not relevant to anything going on around us today at all. But this is you can spend a lot of time arguing about nothing if you want to. Dane Kirkendall, I graduated from Capitol High School back in 2005. I know the area well. For better or worse, I'm coming back. I look forward to meeting you and other sane people. You are a patriot. Well, I'm glad. I'm looking forward to seeing you. And we need good people in Washington State who are going to vote the right way and help us shift the state in a direction that's sane and a way for the crazy people that seem to be wanting to run government and grifting off of it today. Diesel for the People News. State of Texas court ignore the criminal law 14, 15, and 16 and Transportation Code 543 and became the worst police state ever of breaking laws. How do we clean it up? Well, that I don't know. I'm not as familiar with what Texas has done, but just because you have Republicans running your state doesn't mean that they're following the law. One of the problems that I've seen with Texas lately is that despite the fact they have Republicans who do clearly control the state, both from the governor's mansion and in the legislature, the local legislators there have got to be shockingly corrupt to their core, regardless of the R next to their name, because they're essentially doing the same thing the Democrats do in California or Illinois or any other state, where they're refusing to cut the property taxes, which they easily have a surplus enough to do, and instead take the excess tax funds that they have, surplus of those funds, and they're squandering it on kickback grifting operations to people that they like. It may not be as insulting to those who are more conservative based on the targeted groups that they're basically kicking the cash to, but it's just as unethical and dishonest, and it's a problem. So anyway, that is an issue. Oh yeah, T.Z. Burton. This is a good one, and I'm glad you brought this up. Todd Myers tried to get the Department of Ecology to comply with the 2008 law, but was denied by a judge, said he was not affected. Yeah, it was a standing question, which, believe me, in Washington State, if you're going to try to if you're going to try to claim you have standing to hold government accountable, the judges will invent any and every fiction that they can imagine to prevent you from trying to hold government accountable. It's pretty amazing, actually. So that's what happens. Now, and then the second part of that is saying, how can a federal court judge then make a national stay on Trump? Well, you're kind of implying that there's some kind of continuity or thought process from judge to judge, which there isn't, and court to court. I know there's theoretically supposed to be, but there typically isn't. And so judges get to make up stuff all the time. They do get shot down later on, but just because you're wearing a black robe doesn't make you infallible, as we have seen many, many times from the inception of the country till today. It was actually a well-known concern that some of our founding fathers had with the judiciary, and they tried to put in checks and balances to control the judiciary, but largely the judiciary has become lacking much control for the most part. So the challenge, of course, is that these judges tend to have, and this is a political viewpoint, of course, but it really tends to be it's a deference, a substantial deference that they give to the federal government that isn't deserved. And this is going back to arcane issues related to the Chevron defense, which I know has been shot down recently by the Supreme Court, and they've overturned it at the federal level. But you've still had 5-6 decades of abusive government policies that were justified under that original decision. And it's going to be a long road back to restoring people's control over government rather than government's automatic deference in their ability to abuse you through the bureaucracy and the Administrative Procedures Act and a lot of other ways of bloating this leviathan of a state. And it's at the state and federal level. But remember, these bureaucracies kind of link up together. And judges are loath to ever overturn the abuses of the administrative state. At some point in time, and there are several Supreme Court justices that clearly have a fundamental philosophical belief of reining in the control and abuse of government. But we're still a little ways away before I think we're going to get to the point where we really do roll it back quite a bit. And there's a lot of it that needs to be done. Let's jump down here. Here it is. And another question, kind of a personal question. You don't have to answer if you don't want to. What interested your kids in joining the military, and have you ever considered when you were younger? And I'll take the second part of that question first, which is, actually, I was planning to join the military when I was younger. I don't think I was really planning to go to college. I was a good student, obviously, but I was planning to go into the military. That was kind of my plan. And the Navy, more specifically, my family, there were a number of family members I had that were in the Navy. I wasn't as focused on my life plans at the time, and it just seemed like a good idea, and I was a very patriotic kid, and so I thought I would join the Navy and join the military, and I was interested. In fact, I remember when I went to the community college near us, I think it was Highline Community College, and they had like a college fair there. And I graduated from Thomas Jefferson High School, and so they brought us up there. Kids went because it was a way to get out of school for the day. Not too many people took it seriously, but I remember I went to the academies and actually talked to them, and I was kind of interested in the Naval Academy, interested in West Point, and didn't understand the process to apply or get into them at the time. I was interested again in the military when I was at Columbia, and Desert Storm happened when I was in college. So I actually went down to a recruiter's office and visited with them, and they told me I couldn't join and be deployed overseas fast enough to actually get there at the time. So as some of you may have seen my older stories about when I organized the Support Our Troops rallies on campuses back then in the 90s. I did that on a couple hundred campuses, actually. It was a group called Students Mobilized Against Saddam Hussein, called SMASH. So I did a lot of that back then. And then I didn't think again about joining the military so much because a friend of mine was going to West Point, and we used to run track and cross country against them. And I remember going to West Point and meeting her. She'd been a couple years behind me in school. It was highly unusual for anybody from Thomas Jefferson to actually leave the state and go to college anywhere. And so it was just, and then here she ended up being in the same league. And so I went up and met with her at this track meet. And at the time, if you remember, after Desert Storm, they were doing this huge cutback in the military. And so a number of people, she said, that were going to be graduating from West Point weren't even going to get a commission. And so it seemed like a really bad idea to join the military to me at the time because of all the cutbacks that were going on. And at the time, it seemed like there was a certain sense of the end of history in the 90s, mid-90s. There really was a sense that Cold War was over, the Soviet Union was gone, Berlin Wall came down, China was a backwards country, not really going anywhere fast. We actually figured, despite Tiananmen Square, that I remember thinking that maybe China was going to become a more freedom-oriented country. I actually ended up traveling there a lot over the next few years. So the next time that I thought about joining the military was, of course, after 9/11, and until I broke my arm in a car accident. But that was something that came up on my radar then. So my kids got interested. My daughter got interested in joining the military because she was overseas on an exchange program in Germany, and being overseas for a year made her a lot more patriotic, I think, too. We're a very patriotic family, but that made her appreciate America even more. more. She came back. She always had a heart for service, and she applied to a couple of the different academies. She got in, and the Air Force Academy, they were better at wooing her to the academy, and she's thriving there. My youngest son has been then went, and we visited because we visited her at the academy, and so that's made him more interested in joining the Air Force as well. So that's why they're in the military. I did not serve in the military, so my kids are going down that path. I do have a lot of family members that have served in the military, but it's very different. So Brian Smith, great question here. We've all seen the reaction to Mr. Trump's Doge. I'm assuming you mean Doge there on the federal level. Question, are you seeing any reaction by the Dems in Washington? Yes and no. I mean, the main thing is the indivisible folk, which I think are basically the No Kings group now, or the One America crew, or the MoveOn.org. All these groups are kind of Antifa, right? They're all blurred together. But they were really upset about me putting on these Doge Washington classes. They've sent some people to try to go into them, but they don't want to pay the $15, and so they usually get angry outside the door and stomp off, yelling about the patriarchy or something, or Donald Trump. The other thing is, I had an article that was written about it, the Skagit County Doge training class up there, and the journalist did a surprisingly fair article. I was expecting a hit piece like you usually do with the media. He apparently lost his job shortly after writing a fairly fair article, which is disappointing to me, because it'd be nice to have some honest journalists in Washington state somewhere. But he got massive blowback and attacks from the left for daring to write an accurate article. So my guess is we'll probably have somebody that'll really blow a gasket over it moving forward. I think it starts to happen more as you expose the issues. One of the reasons why the federal Doge gets a lot more blowback is it's actually a federal agency. So they have direct access to Treasury Department information, and that allows them to dig deeper and more accurately through government records to identify the fraud and the corruption and the waste right there. The Doge Washington, what we have to do is use the Public Records Act and whistleblowers and other inside sources to collect that data from the outside and then be able to expose it that way, which is a little different process. A little bit more cumbersome, not as efficient, but certainly exposing corruption in Washington is not too hard. There's a lot of it out there, so it really does help. But that's a good question. I like that question because it is something that we're watching, and we'll see what happens moving forward. Here's a question from TZ Burton. It says, he's saying, what is up with the AG's office teaming up with Perkins Coie, Democrat law firm behind suing Trump? Emails had a common interest privilege label on them. Yeah, that's interesting. And that came out recently. Center Square had a good article about this, exposed through some public records requests and maybe some discovery along the way. And Perkins Coie, as many people may not know, is a Democrat-based law firm in Seattle, Democrat-focused law firm, one of many. Most of them are all Democrat law firms, but that one in particular has been more hyper-partisan, and probably because they were involved in Steele dossier cover-up and laundering Hillary Clinton's campaign cash to conceal the true use of those funds and where they went. So Perkins Coie got exposed quite a bit after the fake Russian cover-up program, but they've continued to be involved. And one thing to remember about Bob Ferguson is that he utilized the contracts. I did a whole video on this, I think a couple years, I don't know if it might have been a year ago now, maybe a year and a half ago, on how the Attorney General's office, particularly under Bob Ferguson, used their outside counsel contracts to influence, essentially it's a pay-to-play thing. So if your firm's willing to give Bob Ferguson campaign contributions, then he would hire your firm to do various legal services for him. And the AG's office, even though they have 800 attorneys now, that's not enough, of course. So what they have to do, and the quality of their attorneys appears to be low, and so what they'll do is they seem to be, that's weird. It looks like it changed the focus there, didn't it? That's funny. That was a change. That was an odd focus problem with the camera. I'm not sure why. The AG's office basically decided to pay that, so Perkins Coie is one of those law firms that was involved in that process. So I'm not sure if this camera is going to come back on me or if it's going to stay fuzzy here. Let me see if that changes anything. Nope, it's just going to stay fuzzy. Don't know what happened. Somehow that camera got out of clarity and out of focus, and I don't know what it takes to fix that right now. Not while I'm sitting in front of it. Anyway, so Perkins Coie is just corrupt, like a lot of those law firms are, and it's a pay-to-play scheme. Not so much blaming the law firm, actually, as I am the Attorney General's office and the fact there's no such thing as ethics at the AGO's office, and there never really has been, probably for a long time. So this little pay-to-play scheme that's gone on, and you get thousands and thousands of dollars of campaign contributions, and then you'll get hundreds of thousands of dollars back in these legal contracts. It was pretty interesting. I think it's pretty pervasive, and in my opinion, it would be considered dishonest, but that's how it is. Sorry, guys, I'm going to use the wider camera over here, which I know is probably it doesn't feel as interesting in a live stream, so I might cut this live stream a little short here just based on some technical difficulties. But when I'm switching over to the camera here, it's just totally blurred. I don't know how long it has been, but that just isn't going to make sense to use that right now. Good thing I have two cameras running. I feel used and wronged by Washington State. How should I pursue reparations, and from who or what? This is from Jack Polliter. And obviously this is kind of funny because this is based, I assume you're asking this question because of the reparations bill that Bob Ferguson pushed through and the Democrats pushed through to give basically free housing costs to certain minorities if they like you. And it's just so corrupt. And it's based on racial discrimination, claims at some point in time in the history, and it's obviously corrupt and dishonest and clear violation of equal protection. But under the law, because there isn't equal protection if you're going to define people by their immutable characteristics and then give them cash kickbacks for that as a reward just because they exist, that's very dishonest. If you're really going to care about reparations, then let's pick a corporation that's been around since the 1860s or more, since long before the 1860s, that actually built into its platform a defense of slavery, and have them be the ones who actually pay reparations. And the only entity I'm aware of that exists that fits that criteria is the Democrat Party today. So if we're going to have reparations, the Democrat Party and their donors are the ones who should be paying it. Have you ever been to Vancouver's waterfront? I honestly don't know about it. How long will it remain clean and nice before the homeless moves in? This is from Jason Fisher. And the answer is yes. I've been down there. I love it. It actually is beautiful. And I know they're doing a lot of construction still down there, but it is a nice waterfront place. It would hardly be the first city ruined where a waterfront that was beautiful gets ruined by homeless drug addicts. But so far, they seem to have been kept it clean so far. We'll see if they're able to keep it going. Obviously, Clark County and Vancouver, if they were serious, they could certainly greatly reduce the homeless drug addict population, except that there's a lot of money to be had in giving grant grifting kickback schemes on that. Dane Kirkendall, the Air Force is a good choice for your kids. Just tell them to be in aviation. We get treated and paid better than 99% of everyone in the service. I'm not sure how many of them are going to be in aviation specifically. I do know that my oldest daughter is going to be jumping out of airplanes this summer, and she's looking forward to that. But she's also on the rock climbing team, so she doesn't seem to mind doing those types of activities. I'm going to go back to this main camera. This still bugs me. I don't know how it did that. Anyway, so that's kind of a weird technical problem. Sorry, guys. I don't know why it did that. Let's see, my daughter works for that law firm, Perkins Coie, I'm assuming. She is very liberal, but she hates working there. She says they are so unorganized. Well, that's probably why they get paid the big bucks, and squandering the money there in a big law firm is, one of the things that happens. I worked in a big law firm when I was in college in New York City, and I remember I was just a law clerk, and not an important position, but it was a great way to make some money while I was in college. And I'm eternally thankful for the fact that I had the opportunity to go there and work and make that money while I was in college when I desperately needed it. However, the reason why I never became a lawyer is because I did work in a big law firm, and over the years, I didn't listen to my dad, who was an attorney, and told me not to go into law. But over the years, what I found is that every partner in that firm over the couple years I worked there, I'd be working really late at night sorting through large volumes of documents. And so they'd see this young kid, going through the documents, and they'd be the last guy leaving at 1 a.m. or something. And they'd stop in and visit, usually on the way out to the elevator. And if no one else is around, they all told me, don't go and become a lawyer. It's in the span of time I was there, every single person that worked there eventually told me that was a partner or a lawyer. And I eventually realized these guys are at the top of their game, getting paid huge dollars. It doesn't get any better than this if you were in their career path. And if they all felt that way, maybe that's not the path for me. And that's why I never became an attorney. It's funny considering how many times I've been in court since then. Jason Fisher, question, would it be possible for CTRAN, school districts and parks to create their own police departments, and would this be effective? School districts cannot do that. If school districts can contract out for public safety officers, and they have to do that with the local police department or the sheriff's office. I guess in theory they could hire a private company to come in and do that, but they're not going to be structured in a way that they could actually create their own police department. CTRAN, because we've seen transpo police departments in the past, some kind of, this is not uncommon. You have trained police, you have subway police, you have the stuff that's happened. New York tried to go down that road over the years, and I remember one of Giuliani's reforms when he took over as New York mayor, was that, and by the way, guys, if you're just jumping in, this is my main camera. It's blurry as heck, and I don't know why. So, and there doesn't seem to be anything I can do to fix it right now, so that's why I'm going with this widescreen shot here. Anyway, one of Giuliani's reforms to the New York City Police Department was to actually combine them all into one department and not break out a transit police to be separate. And that efficiency improvement seemed to work. That doesn't mean they didn't have a transit division. It just means that they didn't want to keep them as a separate entity with the overhead and bureaucracy that tends to come up with that. So anyway, we'll see how my guess is that they'll just if they're going to need law enforcement, they'll just outsource to the existing entity that's there. And again, guys, sorry, this is why I'm not using my main screen. The camera went blurry on me, and I don't know how to fix it from here. And so I'm just going to keep going with the live stream the way it is. So Brian Smith, so now the follow-up to my earlier Doge question. We can all see the effect ICE is having on the Dems. Perhaps we need to start a Washington ICE or ICE Washington training, or how to support ICE, which would actually be funnier. Now, that's a great question, and I will look into that. I love that idea. I like the way you think, Brian. So I am kind of serious too. I see that you say you're kind of kidding, but I actually am kind of serious too. That'd be kind of funny. Ryan Berg, where is the RNC? They seem to be conspicuously silent post-November elections and appear to be riding out the nuisance of the MAGA movement and are biding their time until 2026. Well, I don't think that's probably completely true, but I'm sure as heck not going to be the guy who speaks up for the Republican National Committee. I don't know what they're thinking, but I will tell you this, that my guess is that generally they should be focused on 2026, since pretty much the only thing that the party is really responsible for doing is getting more people in their party elected to public office. So I sure as heck hope they're focused on that, because I wouldn't have to be too worried about being focused on running the government, provided you have good people and they're doing it right now. And they clearly do need more Republicans in the legislature to give us a better chance of actually getting some of the governmental cuts that we need, and to hold the reform process going forward. There's no doubt that if you had the Democrats in charge of both houses, or even one house, that full on, nothing would get done, and then you would have no cuts at all. I don't mind nothing getting done in government, but I want it to be cut or shrunk. And if you can't shrink it, then I'd still at least have a marginal possibility of it being shrunk with Republicans, and no chance at all with Democrats in there. Let's see. Anne Grama Crafts, would you ever consider doing a segment on the grant grifting and naming programs and exposing those activities? Yes, I would, actually. And there's a ton of them going on out here. Pretty much almost everybody involved in the homeless grant grifting operations, they all fit that category. There might be a couple of exceptions, but very few. So the vast majority of them are definitely grant grifting operations, primarily focused on ensuring that drug addicts get pampered, that they get stuck in the lifestyle that they're stuck in. There's no desire at all to reform. They want to make sure they keep taking the drugs, especially fentanyl, and until they die, and using them as window dressing to justify bigger grant dollars next time. There's no desire in any of those groups I've ever seen try to do anything to actually change the trajectory or the population levels that we currently have here, and it's a big problem. don't know why I keep going back. I keep trying that camera to see if it's going to clear up, but it doesn't. So let's see. Matt M. at We the Governed. I don't know why that didn't show up here. Oh, you didn't spell it right, by the way. Lots of houses on the market in my neck of the woods in Olalla that have been sitting for 2 weeks, or for weeks. 2 years ago, it was 4 days max to sell. Is a California exodus coming here? That's a good question, and I'm not sure. The Washington State is a destination state for a lot of people that leave California, but it is not. Oh, okay. Now I see your next part of the question here, which is you meant California-type exodus, you meant, from Washington. I don't think there's that much. Every time I look at this data, there's more people coming into Washington than leaving. It's not as dramatic as it was in the past, and several recent policy changes, like increasing the taxes, will probably ensure that no longer happens. So I think the cooling of the housing market in Washington State is definitely there. Part of it also is the destruction of the ability to rent your property through the stupidity of some of the recent rent control bills and the other things they put in. Since rent controls failed every single time in human history it's ever been tried, that seemed to be the perfect public policy for the Democrats in Washington State. So they've gone down that road, and essentially that reduces the value of the property, because what happens if you were buying that extra house that we were saving up to fix it up and use that as income in your retirement and rent it to somebody, that became a delusional bad idea, basically, of one that doesn't probably pencil out the same way anymore. And so those homes, I think, are being sold, and that's flooding the market to some extent with a bunch of extra homes that nobody wants to have as rentals any longer. And so that's going to have an impact as well. I just don't know. You're seeing a layoff. Microsoft's laying some people off. Amazon's laying some people off. Some of these bigger companies certainly moving out of Seattle. How that impacts and that ripples into the rest of the economy, I don't know. But, it just depends on where you live. So we'll just have to see. But I do have to say that Brian, Brian Smith, you had the coolest question that's really making me think here about setting up that how to help ICE Washington training program in Washington State. Now that could be fun, especially maybe if I organize that and reserve a room at the Evergreen State College campus or maybe up at the UW. That just seems like a great opportunity to do good community outreach and have a fascinating experience with the local, mostly violent, peaceful protests in the area and see how they would go. So you've got me thinking about that one. So I may very well do that in the future. Guys, I'm sorry. I had this weird technical problem here. I cannot explain it or fix it at this point in time. So I'm in this talking to you from the distance screen, which is probably less interesting in a live stream type format. So I'm probably going to start to wind this one down here today. But I want to thank you anyway for putting up with our technical challenges here at the studio. Rarely do we have them like this, as anybody who's a longtime viewer would know. But as I mentioned earlier, I've got the 6 scheduled Doge training classes coming up. Make sure you go to a website at We the Govern and look at what those are. Also, I need to catch up on some of my PDC complaints. There's a few that have been processed, Public Disclosure Commission complaints where I've caught politicians breaking the law, and some of them have been processed. It's worth talking about a few of those cases that got resolved recently, and we'll have to get back to that maybe next week. So my plan is next Tuesday, same time, same place. Hope you're enjoying the summer. I certainly am enjoying it at this point in time. Stay safe out there, and we will see you then basically next week. And enjoy the 2 videos that we have coming out. And again, sorry for the technical problems here. Thank you so much for watching, guys. And remember, the future does belong to those who show up. So get out there and show up.